Hello, everybody. Um, I see a delay, so we may be doing that fun again. I guess let me know if you see a delay or not, and I will try to fix that. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry, I'm a little late starting. I forgot to put chat up for some reason. So, normally I'm so good to get ready. I see Quindy and Casmania. I'm hoping that we have some other of the quiet people out there as well. Ah, and there's Bob and Julie with a little cat with sunglasses on. That's fun. So today I'm going to talk about red and green and the painting of Zed. Well, I'm going to be doing something different with the green and with the red, just to mix it up a little. People mention that they liked having things mixed up, which I won't always be able to do, but is definitely possible for today. So I will switch over to the other view and we'll start doing fun stuff. Oh, there we go. So I just had this here, so there's something there when I started looking at the desktop. So these are the holiday paints. We swatched these last week. If you missed the episode and you'd like to see what the colors look like coming out of the bottle. And it's nice to be able to look at these ones are the two metallics. You can see that better in video than you can in photos. So I'll probably show that again later and talk about some of the Reaper stuff. Actually, I'm reminded to check my phone because I asked Ron a question and he did not get back to me. So I don't have confirmation on whether the Christmas samplers are still in stock or not. But I will assume that they are and mention stuff related to that. So, okay, where have I been lately? Let's see. So we did the swatching last week. Looked at some holiday stuff. So today I want to paint some red on this little mistletoe goblin, which is one of the 12 days miniatures. And as of today, all of those are available for individual purchase. At least I think it's all of them. I think they usually just do whatever's left in stock after they fulfill the, they finish the 12 days period where they're doing free gift with purchase, but they're all up individually now. So if there was just one or two that you wanted, or if you fall in love with this guy after I paint on him some today, you can get him. And I've got an article up about painting this guy last year. The gingerbread night. I'm not sure if I missed something. So I was just talking about the 12 days miniatures that are normally, so Reaper does the 12 days of Reaper where they're a gift with purchase. The gingerbread man is currently only in a sampler, which I do not know whether you're still getting samplers with a daily purchase of $60 or more. I checked to see if they were out of stock because I like to find out before I tell you guys to go do stuff or get stuff. And I'm guessing Ron is pretty busy today and he wasn't able to get back to me on that. So if you go look at the article about this, which I think is Focus on Scarlet Study or something to try to help Quinty find it, I'm making one change, and I'll talk about that a little later when I get there. These are the colors that I used to paint it. And I'm actually going to add a few colors and talk about, why I pick certain colors or how you don't need as many colors as I'll be using. But just to make it quicker for me to paint, which is also why I did, I put the base coats on there so you guys don't have to sit through the paint drying part. But for the green, well, before I get to that, there's also an article with a similar range of greens where I painted something light green and something dark green, which was the leprechaun from last year, Finn Greenwell. And he's available all the time, I think. I don't think he was just a holiday special, because I believe that's in Bones USA. So there's a record of the green colors I used for that online. I'm going to look, hold on. So this laptop that I do this on is like a PC laptop that they sent me. And I haven't really ever had a laptop before. And a few years ago, I switched to Mac. And this thing, it just every time you turn it on, there's 15 things it wants me to do or update or buy or whatever. And it's like, is there not a setting where I can just tell this thing that I use this, once a week to use 2 programs? Please stop bothering me. But apparently not. Anyway, that's a divergence. So I'm not going to be using these colors today. I don't think. We'll find out what colors I use, because what I want to talk about, if you were here last week, you probably saw, I have this, our neighbor has this, they had one of these as a child, so it was kind of like an antique. I mean, I guess stuff from 1971 counts as antiques now. I don't love the sound of that, but it's true. Ashtray that she loved as a child, but it has some chips, and her husband just wanted me to paint some green on there just so you didn't see the white. But I did go in and sculpt. Bob and Julie had suggested that I use the epoxy sculpt that I experimented with a few different putties for a different project a couple of shows ago. And it really did not want to stick, but once it's on there, it was good, and I was able to sand it. I think that it'll match pretty well, and it won't be very noticeable once I get the paint on. But now the trick is I have to paint it, and I have to match these colors. So I thought I would talk through how I would go about matching colors, which for a long time when I first started painting is something I would not have wanted to do this. I would have been like, all right, I guess I'll try, but I wouldn't have been very confident about it. I didn't start out with someone like, if you watch Anne's show in the mornings, well, I guess lunchtime. Is she a lunchtime show, sort of? She probably talks a lot about color, and she's like really good at matching colors and has a lot of color sense and stuff. And I would not say that I had any of that. But over the years, I have managed to learn. So I wanted to share that because I think you can too. So I figure if I talk through how you might do this, even if you're not super confident about it. And what I would start by doing is just getting a bunch of paints. So I have a selection of green paints here. The red paints are for later. So I'll just take out the green ones. And compare it to the thing. And basically, you're just playing warmer, or, hot or cold. Which one seems like it matches and which one doesn't seem like it matches. So I think this is a fairly... It might look different on your screen, but in my hand, I thought of this as a somewhat bluish green, like the undertones were kind of blue. It doesn't seem to have a lot of yellow in it if you look at the lighter spots. But we'll see if I'm right about that or not. So let's grab a paint that's like a blue-green. So in fact, let's start with the holiday. One of the new holiday paints this year is Spruce Green, which if you thin it out, you can see that it's a very bluey green. So if I look at that, we'll look on the back. I'm not sure it does matches, but I think I'm going to have to paint it out to really know for sure. So I'm going to pick my most likely candidates, I think, and paint those out. I'll do a few different ones. This pine green has a little more yellow in it, I think. Let's zoom in just a little. So how does that compare? It doesn't seem super likely to me. It seems too dull, like this is a very rich green, and it seems a little duller. So I don't think that's a likely candidate. This dragon green is a richer color. It's a little lighter, so it would be more, I'm trying to match this part than this really dark part. And then this is, that's like almost black or blue line or something, but I don't have to paint any of that area, so I'm not too worried about that. This one looks possibly close, if the focus would focus. So that's a good candidate. This one I think is probably a little too, well, I think it's a little too blue, but we'll test it. This I don't think fits. I think it's too dull. So this is Christmas Wreath, which is also one of the holiday paints this year and has been a holiday paint in the past. And here I think that it is awfully yellow. I mean, by comparison to this. This is a green with more yellow in it. It's not like a yellow green, but it's a green with more yellow in it. So I don't think that's going to fit, but maybe we'll check that one. This is Basilisk Green. I think I like the look of that one. Forest Green really has a lot of blue in it if you thin it down. So I think that's got too much blue. So let's compare it to the Spruce Green. And it's subtle, but there's definitely a difference there. Which you don't, this is why I do the thinning out thing. Because if you look just at the straight out of the bottle color, they look a lot closer together in color than when I start to thin them down. So I'm eliminating Forest Green for sure. Then I have this Elven Green, and there's a comparison of, a blue green. I guess I would maybe almost call this one like a green, I don't know. And then let's get one of the greens with more yellow. So you can see that even though they're all green and they're all like saturated, more primary greens, they're not like super saturated, but they're not khaki green or green brown or something like that. You can see that there's quite a range from whether it has a little more yellow or whether it has a little more blue in it, or it's kind of in the middle. So I think that this one probably has a little too much yellow, but maybe we'll test that too. So I'm going to be, I did this test last night, so I actually know what my answers are, but I wanted to this is exactly what I did last night. So I have a little cheat sheet that I'm going to look at to make sure I keep the ones that I thought worked. What did I have here? Yeah, we'll test the spruce. I like that actually. Yeah, we'll test a couple here. So I've got a few of the darkest ones, and then I'm pretty sure that this Christmas wreath is too yellow, but I will test it so that we can confirm that it's too yellow. And then these are kind of the medium ones. So I'll paint those, and then these for the darker one. But then there's also, if you look around the edge here, that really almost doesn't even look like green. That looks more like almost turquoise or something. So I also have these paints to look at for the edge, because I'll probably, since most of these problems are on the edge, I'm definitely gonna have to paint some of that on, and I may have to mix with kind of one of my more middle colors to get that in between part. So I mean, that one looks pretty close, but I have another kind of lighter color that also looks pretty close. And then this one is what I actually thought would be the closest. And maybe. So this color doesn't have a number. This was last year. They did this. If you buy a bunch of paint, you would get a special paint with it. And this was one of the special paints. So this is not in the permanent collection. So I'm kind of hoping this doesn't match, because I like to show you paints you can use. So I'm going to start by doing a different kind of swatching. This is the swatching I would do to solve a problem like this, or if I'm testing colors to see which one do I like for stuff. You know, when I'm doing a color scheme. So it's not necessarily matching, but even though I have these on the bottle, and this does help a lot with the choosing color scheme things, I haven't felt as necessary to do that. But just like when I was, looking at the color scheme for the autumn elf, the poor autumn elf that languishes incomplete. We'll probably return to him in January when it's definitely not autumn. But I will do stuff like this to see if colors go together as well as just what they look like. So let's see. So I'm just going to use a piece of index card for this. I'm not going to go get my fancy watercolor paper, because it's just a quick test. So I will start with kind of the middle colors, I think. So these were my 3 middle color candidates. And then the trick is, of course, to write down what each color is, so that you know what it is. Because you see, I didn't do that here. So if I come back 2 years from now and I'm like, oh, I really liked that, I will just have to sort through all my paints to find that one. But for this, especially when I'm comparing things, what I will sometimes do is I'll put the paints out on my desk in this order, and then I'll do the swatches in that same order, and then just compare if it's, I'm trying to be real quick about it. But since I'm likely to get distracted when we start chatting about things and stuff like that, I'm going to go ahead and write the numbers on. And I would actually probably normally write the names, because I do not ever remember the numbers. I operate by names. As usual, I have shaken these paints up before I started the video streaming, so they are more well shaken than they appear. And you should shake your paints more at home. I eliminated pine green, so I'm going to get that off my desk. Just moving some stuff around so I don't splash on my poor little mistletoe goblin. Since he's not green, he's red. So I'm going to, let me swap the palette actually, because we all know that my camera hates to focus on the palette. I'm going to start with the Yes, the dragon green. I'm just just going to do like a, fairly high coverage coat. And then I will thin it down a little because I do find that useful to matching sometimes. Then I've got Christmas wreath, one of the Christmas colors. So it'll be kind of cool if that does match. It'll be very thematic. And then basilisk green, which is not thematic, but is a very nice color. Very rich. I like it a lot. Oh, I did forget to mention the other challenge with this, and I was thinking about this when I was trying to figure out how to match these colors, is this is super shiny. Like, our paints are matte, and we're used to painting matte things. So I was trying to decide if I would have to do these swatches and then put a gloss coat over them to really do a comparison. I think it worked out all right not doing that, but that's something to be aware of, is that the finish of things is going to change your perception of them, of the color. Like, things that are shiny tend to look darker. And I will be, after I paint that ashtray, I'm going to gloss coat it so that hopefully the finish matches, and then it shouldn't be distracting at all. So then for the darkest colors, I picked out spruce green and elven green. Spruce green is again one of our Christmas colors. And then elven green is not. But it is a cool color. And then I figure if I want to go any darker than that, I can mix in, I would test mixing black or blue liner in. And I suspect that because it's so dark, it really wouldn't make much difference which one I picked. But since most of my problems are on the edges, I don't think I'm going to have to worry about that. So that's the Christmas wreath, which is quite a beautiful color. You can see how much blue there is in it. I mean, it's not quite turquoise, but it's not that far away. When I'm taking the brush off screen, I'm just dipping it in my water thing and getting some of the paint off and getting some extra water. So I'm not bothering to mix it with medium or anything like that. Like, when I do that on here, it's just so it'll stick better. And then we also have these lighter colors. So that was copper verdigris, mint green, and then no number sea glow. And yes, I too wonder how I can paint precisely on miniatures when that is my handwriting. Queenie has very kindly shared the links to the articles I have about painting red and green. So if you like to read or want to reference stuff later, that is available to you. Oh, I'm not quite on camera. So have any of you ever done something like that? A non-mini painting project, or used our tools in any other way? Because I have occasionally found that, like, my hobby skills will translate into some other part of life, and that's fun when that happens. I did once do a temp fix on our faucet with green stuff, because I believe it is descended from plumber's putty, so it seemed like a logical thing to do, and it worked for a while. And then so we'll just talk about that a little while these dry. Then the other thing so we got, they call it luxury vinyl flooring. But it's waterproof because we are constantly having water problems. So we didn't even want water resistant. We wanted waterproof. Bob and Julie used to repair statues for the local comic shop. Oh, that's cool. I bet you saw some interesting things and some tragic breakage, I bet. So the downside of this vinyl flooring stuff, so it's like super durable and it's, the cat throws up, you just wipe it up, whatever. But it's a little finicky about what you can use to wash it. So we had to get the special solution. So we have like a knot Swiffer made by this other company. But they say if you're not going to use it for a week or two, to take the solution out and stuff. And it's like, I don't know, that doesn't seem like the real world. But we didn't wash for a little while and the thing clogged up. So we bought another thing, but then I'm like, you know what? Like, this seems dumb. Because what's clogging? It just means the solution is drying out. So give me the little sprayer part out of it. So now every time we want to wash the floor, I just take one of my sculpting tools and pick out this little clog in the sprayer tool. It takes me like 5 seconds, and then we wash the floor. So you don't have to do their silliness if you have little tools. Risen Solari says, I fixed a knob in our old Toyota with green stuff. I told my wife, see, I couldn't have done that if I didn't hobby. Excellent. Yes, it comes in handy for some stuff. Don't think I tried gluing using putty on we had this cat toy that would like hang over the door that our cat loved, and eventually it broke, and I tried gluing it together, but the cats are so rambunctious that really did not solve the problem, so we just had to buy another one of those, but I tried. All right, so now let's compare our samples to did this just dim? No. To the, I think trying it on the back will probably work best. So I think that color, it's a little light, but it's for the lighter end. So I think that's pretty close. That one doesn't seem bad either, but maybe a little yellow. I like this one as well. It's a little bit darker. Now this, I think, is just too blue. That one I like a little better for the darker colors. So I don't know if you agree or not, but that's where my assessment was. But now the colors that will be more obvious, I think, are these lighter ones. So let's see if I've got a good spot. I'll have to zoom in just a smidge on that, because it's a smaller area. So I think that's pretty good. But that I like better. That's just like, it's a little bit blue and it's a little bit green. And then this, which seemed like, since we're painting a green object, it seemed like it should be the one, but it's too green. So let's see what colors I actually picked in the end, which is, I picked this one and this one, and then that one. And for some of them, I'm going to have to mix. So for the mid-tone colors, or even for the highlights, I think I have to mix the two greens together to get kind of a green in the middle. Let's see, Basilisk and Dragon. So I have all these paints because I am trying to minimize mixing, but sometimes if you're like really trying to match stuff, you have to do a little mixing. So that's the Basilisk. There's the Dragon. Let's mix those together. Thin it out a little too. And then the mint. But for some of the in-between parts, I'm going to have to mix the mint with some of this. I think that'll match pretty well. I might use more the Dragon and the mint together because that's maybe a little washed out. But that's kind of the thinking process I went through in trying to match colors to this. Hey, Rings Raccoon. I'm sorry that you weren't able to join us initially, but I'm glad you're with us now. I was talking about how I was matching the colors to this ashtray of a friend of ours that I'm trying to paint up and fix for them. But then we were also exchanging notes on, have you used your hobby skills for non-hobby things? So Bob and Julie used to fix statues for the local comic shop, and Wiz and Soleri fixed a knob on their Toyota with green stuff. I did once fix a faucet. Well, temporarily fix a faucet with green stuff. I mean, it lasted for a good few months, but then eventually we did have to go buy a faucet. But it gave me time to go look and make sure I got one I liked. So because this is a gift for someone else, I'm going to do the actual painting off stream so that I don't make a ton of mistakes. So I don't know if you have any hobby stories to share with us, Rings, but you're welcome to, or other people who are listening. So this is the red. Where are we time-wise? So I'll probably be able to get some time painting done on this guy. So these are the reds that I originally used on this Mistletoe Goblin in the article that Quindy linked earlier. So I added a few to that. So I've got the red neon glow, which is kind of my secret weapon for reds. It's something salmon. It doesn't necessarily have to be this one. I think one of the new Kickstarter ones worked well too. But I liked that. That was the one I had at the time. And before that, I used to use Red Dust, which was one of the... and now I'm totally blanking. Reaper did a set of paints for another company that did like mechs and stuff. So, but the other color, which was kind of like the mid-tone for part of it, is Brilliant Red, which is one of my favorite reds to use, especially when I'm in a rush. So if I'm super picky about it, I might go pick, the way I was looking at those greens just now, and I was being very, is this a little too blue-green or what? If I'm doing that, there are other reds that I might choose to use. If I just need something that's a fairly saturated red and I'm trying to paint more quickly, I pretty much reach for Brilliant Red every time. So those were those two spots, and then there was some in between. But I was looking at my shelf of reds, and I noticed that Hollyberry, which is another one of our holiday colors, this is through the Christmas sampler this year, but it's been sold in past years, so many of you may have it, kind of fit in between there. So that'd be one less, one or two less steps I have to mix, and that will save me time. That's why I have so many paint colors, is so that I can mix, but if I don't have to, that saves me time. So then the sad thing is the color that I used as kind of the first shadow level has been canceled, unfortunately. You can just mix these two together. So you can take the Crimson Red, which is kind of if I'm doing a dark red, is one that I often reach for. So you can just mix the Brilliant Red and the Crimson Red together and get the middle thing. And then what I had done at the time was mix the Crimson Red with blue liner, and I didn't really use any blue liner. I mean, that I might have used a little on the darker red, but I didn't use any on the brighter red. But I noticed when I was looking at my shelf, because I've done all these nice swatches now, is that this color is pretty similar. So instead of mixing between those two, I'm just going to use Regal Purple, which alas also has been canceled. So I code them now so that I know when I'm telling you, guys, paints that aren't available, and I try not to do it, but I do like some colors that are canceled, so it's hard for me to never use canceled colors on stuff that I share with people, because I share almost all my things with people. Ring said hobby skills are infinitely useful for non-hobby things. I was doing that with greens and flashy reds yesterday in paint club. Said I want to mix a 50-50 of pine green and forest green. Yeah, sometimes you just got to be persnickety, but not always. So don't make yourself go crazy because you feel like you always have to be persnickety. But I do want the blue liner out as well. So if you do not have a vast array of paints, you could get away with something like this, and you're just mixing in between those as you need, and then you would need, blue liner or black or something if you're painting a very dark red. So we'll be painting both a medium color red and a dark red. Although actually, while we're talking about what value is red, and here's the green strip that this is from the Leprechaun, but I did a similar thing on the Leprechaun where part of his outfit was a lighter green and part of it was a darker green. So if you're painting something Christmas like that, because sometimes you need to mix it up a little, do wrapping paper a different thing, or somebody's trim a different color, it gives you two options for different values of red and green. But speaking of the value of red, so red is a kind of a unique color in that it fools our eye and our brain a little. Red is a lot darker than you think it is, or at least most people. Maybe I'll turn this upside down so that we're comparing the light to dark scales on the same direction. Clearly, I don't care about that because I painted these within a month of each other, and I painted out the value range is different each time. But red is such an intense, bright color, and it makes us think of fire and color, like light colored things that are light. But in reality, it's actually a lot darker than you think it is. So I'm going to do my thing where you're going to the disco show for a minute with the lights, or with the camera. And eventually we'll get to the black and white. If only there were a way to program this so that I could just go between black and white and regular. But so this is brilliant red. This is the color I said was kind of a mid-tone red. And look how dark it is. I mean, it just looks so dark. And that's really, here's the bottle so you can see I'm not lying to you. It really is that dark. And then this is Hollyberry. That would be one of the highlight colors. And you can see how dark that is as well. And then the salmon color is lighter, but I mean, it's not like white or something. You can see how much darker it is than the paper. So one of the things with red is because our brains say it's lighter, like you'll see that I went up way lighter on the greens than I did on the reds. Because our brains think red is lighter than it is, it's a very rare thing where you don't always need as much highlight contrast as you would need with most colors. But I, as a result, tend to push the shadows a fair bit to make sure that I brought out the form and stuff. Hey, Valander. So this is like the one time, I'm not going to say massive, huge contrast is necessary. The one time. Enjoy this one time. Yes, that's the problem, is that if you go too light on reds, they're going to shift. In color, that's why I use the salmon, because it's splitting the difference between pink and white. So it at least maintains somewhat more of a perception of red. But you can push your shadows a lot with red, and you can get interesting with shadows in red. So in this case, I didn't. This is a pretty by the books, that's a darker red. But you can use purples, you can use greens, you can use blues. You can shade red with a lot of different colors. Rings thinks that they need to have a code for their out-of-print colors because they like a lot of discontinued ones. Yeah, I have so many. It is so hard for me to paint something without using a discontinued or special event color. Like, it is just really, really challenging. And I do have like a little stock of them somewhere. When I get a color that I'm pretty sure I like, even with ones I'm not sure I like yet, I will tend to get an extra one and hide it away in my stash that a certain goblin can never know about. Maybe we need the crow's nest pokey tool, sculpted by Julie and lettered by Bob. And you can try and win one tomorrow. So again, depending on how you paint, you may not need this many steps, and you can mix the steps in between with fewer colors than I'm putting out. It's just, as you can see, very quick for me to put them out this way. And I definitely am not going to need that much purple, but such as it is. And then now that you have seen the palette will be leaving our view because I want the camera to focus on the figure. It also means I have fun with my water container. We'll figure it out. So I put the base coat on him last night while I was doing my green tests. Let's see, I think I can get in one closer. If I go too close, it seems like it gets so blurry that I don't know if it's worth it. But you guys can let me know if you want me to go way close up and a little blurry or not. Ringed Raccoon is also challenged to avoid using the out-of-print colors. And Josh CT, just painting your first Reaper Mini, the Copper Dragon, and just ordered the Kraken. Well, congratulations. I hope you're having fun with them, and welcome to our stream. And there's David Weir as well. So today I'm painting this Mistletoe Goblin, which is one of the figures from the Reaper Halloween Vault that they only bring out at this time of year, and they're now available for individual purchase if you do decide you want this guy. So on the original, and let's just go to my little screen thing for a minute. Well, now I have to go back though, hold on. On the original, I originally thought I would take a break in between. But so on the original guy, you can see I made both the hat and the shirt the same lighter color red, and then the pants are the darker color red. And I was thinking about it as I was doing the base coat and thinking that I don't think there is quite enough contrast in the face area. And then I've got two kinds of green that are sort of competing. And I tried adding some, red on the lips to have the red-green contrast right on the face to help bring the eye there. Then I was thinking while I was base coating it, well, what if the hat was that darker red and then I'm adding a value contrast in that section and maybe it'll help break things up more. So I definitely do not always get things right out of the gate. If you saw those goblins that Ron was showing on, there's like a little quick paint thing that Ron was showing on Reaper Live last week. I had to do some tests to get that color scheme. I didn't just get it right out of the gate. In fact, I got it wrong the first time. So this is a graphic from the webpage that I have about painting red that's just showing you the little piece of paper that I had just now, except I could go in and put labels on what was what. So the range of the lighter red excludes the two darkest colors, and then the range of the darkest colors excludes some of the lighter colors. Again, this is red, so it's a less of a contrast range than I would paint with almost any other thing. And there's the green one, which was a similar thing. Because I was trying to paint two of the same color on the same figure, I was emphasizing one end of the value scale for the lighter green, which is just a very small part of that miniature, and then one end of the value scale for the darker green. And here is the figure that those are on, which admittedly is not a Christmas figure, but those colors would work well on a Christmas figure. Hey Rubigon and Clavicus, thanks for joining us today. So that what I'm trying to do is paint another version of this guy, partly to show you guys how I paint reds, and because I know that's a hard color for a lot of people, but also partly because my parents fell in love with him, so I want to paint one for them. And you can see that I didn't even put primer on the base because I don't know yet what I want to do with the base. It is ideal if you can do all your messy type stuff where you might be using files or putty or whatever before you put any paint on the miniature, but this is real life. Ideal doesn't always happen, and this is going to be one of those cases. I'm thinking about whether I could, one of the few things I can sculpt are wooden planks, because there's this little, one of the little candy wrappers is down on the ground. So I don't want to put too much putty on there because that'll cover it up. So I may just go for either sculpted or painted large floor tiles. Because I think when I do something as a gift, I do want it to be on a bit bigger of a base, because the average person doesn't have like a case where they have a bunch of small stuff. They have like a shelf or a mantelpiece or something where they have bigger decorative items. So, sorry, I'm just verifying something to myself on the where to start with the which color I put where, basically. So I'm pretty sure that I base coat with that color. Yeah. So I like to make it a little bigger because, non-mini people are used to displaying larger objects. Although I'm sure my mom doesn't mind if it's kind of small because she has a lot of stuff to put put on display, so she needs space left over for other things. So I'm going to do the shading first. That's often how I paint. If you've been following the stream, I've been experimenting with painting more where I start with the darkest color and then paint up. Since I'm recreating something I already painted, I wanted to paint it in a similar fashion to the way I already painted it. Now this is maybe going to be a little less persnickety than the way I originally painted this guy. But you can be less persnickety with smaller miniatures. And I also can go back after the stream and fix it if I think it's not perfect enough for my parents. So is that level good, or do you guys want me to try, the way zoom in? Which I do think is blurry. Even when it focuses, I think it just doesn't have great resolution. I'll try holding it up a little more maybe. Take pity on anyone you follow who streams, because learning to keep the thing in the view of the camera is like super challenging. Dark Sword has put out several DVDs for miniature painting, and one of them is with Marika. If you watch at the end, there are some kind of like behind the scenes or outtakes or whatever, and they literally had to tape her down to keep her arm in the right place. The holding arm, not the painting arm. Because she's just very mobile when she paints. She's moving the things around all the time. So even though this underside is really from the lighter shirt fabric, I'm going to paint a pretty dark shadow under there. Because it is facing straight down towards the ground, so it is not getting light. And then that also kind of acts as dark lining between the shirt and the pants. And here we run into the perils of metal, because I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on here. It's very tiny. There's just a tiny little place where I can see the metal shining. I can see it there. That's where I missed priming. But the other spot is rub off. And that just happens with, it'll happen even with plastic miniatures. Like, a place like this, if you're handling it a lot while you're playing with something, you can just sometimes get rub off. So I'm just going to put a little primer on there, and then I'll replace the red, which, I'm working on the darker color, so that's fine. That was just me wiping off. There was like a little white fleck. So I am going to go down to the blue liner. That color that I just painted was the purple, the out of print Regal purple, but there are other dark purples that would probably work as well. But you could get a very similar color by mixing a darker red with blue liner. Or probably even black. If you mix black and some reds, you will usually get something purpley. So if you look at him, the shirt's hanging out, his leg is pushed back. This dark color is not really getting a lot of light here. We still have to paint the dark color on the hat, because I forgot that I had switched the hat to be a darker color. So if you look at the web one, the hat is the same color as the shirt, and I don't think that gives enough contrast. So I'm going to bore the people who've been watching the show for a while, but I think it's an important point, so I'm going to make it again. When we think of contrast, we tend to, as miniature painters, we tend to focus on the contrast of how dark are the highlights, or how dark are the shadows compared to how light are the highlights. And that is an important form of contrast, but it is not the only form of contrast. Another kind of contrast is looking at the miniature as a whole. So if I painted this whole thing the light red or the dark red, there wouldn't be very much contrast between the shirt and the pants. So because I painted them two different values of red, that provides a level of contrast, and it helps you as the viewer immediately identify, okay, these are two different areas on this figure. So I originally had this hat, this like little Santa hat, as the same color as the shirt. And there are a lot of colors that were similar value in this area, which is kind of supposed to be the focal point of the miniature. So I thought if I switch the hat to the darker color on this version, that it will read better, help you see better what you're looking at. And when you think about it, that's kind of our first job. I'm just putting a dark color into a spot that's like a little hole before I paint anything else around there. But if you think about it, our job is as miniature painters is kind of to add paint to the figure to make it more visible to the viewer so that they can see all the work that the sculptor has put into it, because these are really good and detailed things. It's just not obvious when they're unpainted because our room lights aren't strong. Like, you know, if he was in a room, his ceiling light would be where my paintbrush is. His ceiling light is feet away from us. So it works to illuminate me as a person. It doesn't work to illuminate this tiny simulation of a person. So that's why we have to do the whole highlights and shadows thing, but also why it's valuable to do higher contrast between your areas. And this is something I have been traditionally very bad at, as I even did it last year, or I did it wrong. So I'm trying to get a little better and help other people get a little better. Because it's hard to remember to do. Because when you're there, you know, when you're in the thick of painting, you're picking your colors, you're like, okay, well, I kind of want the hair to be this color, and I kind of want the skin to be this color, and I kind of want the shirt to be that color. And then you step back and realize that those are all very similar values, and nothing really stands out. So more and more, I'm learning that time spent thinking about the colors you're going to put on the figure is never wasted time. It feels like wasted time because you're not actually painting. But the more thoughtfully and effectively you make your color choices, the better everything you do paint is going to look. So I'm probably going to have to come back with some of my mid-tone color. I'm probably covering parts over, which is one of the other things that I think makes red challenging to paint, is that lighter reds especially are really hard to cover over. So if you get your shadows too broad, it's going to take a while to build the colors back up where you wanted more highlights. And I meant to bring over the Ifrit and the Ifriti and the Fire Scion. I can't remember what Ron calls things. And there's an article about painting the Ifrit too. And those were really kind of not fun to paint because it was a lot of red. So it took a long time to cover over if I made poor judgments, which I did. The male wasn't as bad because I started with the airbrush, so things were smoother, but I kind of did my usual rough-in colors on the female, and that meant I had a lot of time spent building up smoothness and highlights where I wanted them. But that is life with painting red, which is why some people don't like to do it. And yet Ron must dislike me because he continually asks me to paint things red. And then I think I also have other evidence that Ron doesn't always love me because I got coal this year from Reaper. So I've been naughty apparently. I've not been meeting my deadlines to expectations. So I just put back a little of the mid-tone on the pants. I'm going to do a little bit on here. I can actually see some places where it's not that I covered over it. It's that I hadn't done a fully opaque coat last night when I was painting this. Because I forgot to paint the hat at first. I told myself when I was starting to do it, I'm like, oh, I should paint the hat darker on this. And then I completely zoned and got distracted by my ashtray color matching adventure. Because I would, you know, paint a couple of coats, or paint a coat and then leave it to dry and do some color matching on the ashtray and then go back. So now I'm going to start in the highlights. So far I have been here. This was the color that I initially painted the pants. Then this is a purple color that, let's see if we draw it out a little. Purple color that I was using as my first level of shadow. And then this is blue liner, which is very dark. But it has a slight blue undertone instead of being pure black. So I actually tend to find that it makes a richer colors for mixing and even just for lining than straight black. So I rarely use like black unless I'm painting black. Which interestingly, some of the other, you know, display painters don't even use black for painting black. They use chromatic blacks. But I'll like base coat in black and then use not gray to highlight most things. Let me just give his hat another little check. And then I will start on the highlights. So I'm going to be careful on the pants to try to keep these to fairly small areas because, as I mentioned, they're, you know, the shirt's kind of overhanging them. This is not a focal area of the figure. This is not like where the exciting action is. This is where the exciting action is. Then his hand is, I would say, kind of a secondary focus. Now, there's a nice little detail here when I paint this part. He's his shoe's a little worn out, and you can see his toes through there. So I would want to detail that, but I would want that to be sort of like an Easter egg thing that you might see for after you've been looking at it for a minute or two. Not the first thing you see when you look at the figure. The first thing you see when you look at the figure should be this cute little, he's got his mistletoe and he's making a kissy face. He's trying to get someone to come over under the mistletoe with him. So that, of course, is why I picked the darker red for the pants. I believe Reaper's now consolidated the paint lines, so there's just paint. Master Series Core, I don't know what they're calling it. But the two reds I picked are originally, well, actually the three main reds that I picked were, one of them's canceled, but they were originally from either the HD or the Bones HD line. And they are higher coverage. So they may not be like the truly brightest, most saturated reds that Reaper makes. Those are going to be slightly more transparent and be some of the original core colors. But as I said before, unless I'm being super persnickety, I mean, these are still, you know, there's nice color saturation here. You're starting to see some of the folds and wrinkles on the pants, and that red shirt's nice and bright. So I'm happy with these colors. I'm going to go up and do just a little bit with my brighter red. I'll do more of the brighter red probably on the hat because that is at the top of the figure, so it's receiving more light. So I have to admit I have not tried to do like a dry brushing, washing type technique with red a lot. Maybe that would be something to experiment with on another show. My guess is that because of what I mentioned about red, it being hard to get your bright reds back if you cover them over with shadow colors, washing is essentially covering over everything with shadow colors. So I would probably be willing to dry brush red, but not washing it would just make your life harder, would be my guess. All right, so now I'm going to do the highlights on the hat. As I mentioned, I will be a little more liberal here because it's facing the light. And it is in the focus area. I still want to keep, you know, some of that darkness to make this red look different than the other red. But I might do just like little edge highlights a little more or something like that. He's a fairly small guy, so I am using a 0, slightly smaller brush that I often do, and I have like a smaller brush if the details get really persnickety. Because I do not think there is any shame in going down a brush size if that helps you paint. I don't think you should just automatically paint with the litless little brushes. So to our new painter here, try to push yourself to experiment with larger brushes. It helps you work faster, and eventually it becomes easier because you're doing it. But there are also situations where if a smaller paintbrush is going to make your life easier, then like I don't think there's any shame in this. Because there are people who go like, oh, I paint everything with a size 2 paintbrush. It's like, okay, well, I'm happy for you, but I don't feel like everybody needs to do that. that's not what floats their boat. But I do think most people who are new to the hobby think you need smaller brushes to do everything, and you don't. So like when I was base coating this, I mean, I didn't necessarily use this big a brush. I don't know what I did with the one I used. But, you know, I used a larger brush because I was just trying to get paint all over as quickly as possible. Why make it take longer? When I was thinking about show topics, I was thinking that I should maybe also, hey Daka, Flacca Flame, do one on how not to paint Christmassy reds and greens. Because it's a great color combo because those are complementary colors on a color wheel. But if you don't want something to look Christmassy, how do you use that? It's like Christmas is kind of co-opted using like this kind of red and this kind of green. Like that just screams Christmas in most people's minds, especially if you mix it like you have white on something or you have a lot of gold on something. That's going to really read Christmassy because we're just so used to seeing those colors in a Christmas context. So I think I'm gonna try and do a show on how not to paint red and green, or how not to paint Christmassy red and green. But I think I'm gonna leave it for the new year. But we'll see. I'm very whimsical sometimes. I might change my mind and do it next week because I don't know if I really have decided what I want to do next week. Maybe we'll finish this guy. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what I want to do next week. Because I don't, yeah, it's not the holiday yet next week. I think we're still on. All right, so I think I'm happy with that. Well, you know what? I'm going to push the highlights just a little more. But I see a few places here that I want to make sure that my coat is solid before we get to the shirt. So I'm going to go up just to the holly berry and do a few little... So when you do brighter highlights on things, sometimes the trick is you're going bright, but you keep it in as small an area as you can. And that's what, if you see people's stuff that really pops, that's often what they're doing. And that can be when your smaller brush comes in handy. Because I don't want to make that too bright, but I do want it to stand out more than the pants. Okay, so now on to the shirt. Again, I'm going to start with the shade colors first. And it looks like we had a few people that came in a bit later, so I'll just show my palette again. If I leave it on screen, the focus goes all kerflooey. So this was the range of colors I used for the darker red, and then for the hat I added just a little smidge of this. Now for the lighter red, I might go down as dark as this in a few areas, but I'm going to be focusing around here. So this is like the starting color, the base coat, so these are going to be my main shadows, and then maybe a little bit of this. And then these are going to be my highlight colors. And I may have to mix a little between the, this is my secret weapon for highlighting red neon glow, but I'm going to have to mix a little between that and the holly berry, I think. These colors all work fine for non-Christmas things. It's just I wouldn't combine the greens that I've talked about with the reds that I've talked about if you want to avoid Christmassy colors. Which, if you are feeling a little Scrooge McGrinchous, I have no... I can't talk. I'm not always the most Christmassy person, despite painting such a number of the Christmassy minis. Some years it takes me quite a while to get into the holiday spirit. This year was going all right, but trees hate us. And yeah. So, I mean, we're very lucky with the storms that just happened. Our neighbor's tree fell, but one of her trees and one of our trees caught it. The guy that was just here giving her an estimate on removing that tree said that if it had hit our house, it would have gone right through the roof. So we're very lucky and grateful that that didn't happen. But the tree that it fell on our side, is a really big old tree that when he was looking at her stuff, he's like, oh yeah, that's going to come down by spring when there's a lot of rain and it starts to get new growth. And the cost estimate for removing it was alarming. Very, very alarming. So that has dampened my Christmas spirit for today. I'll go stare at my Christmas tree after and hopefully feel a little better. So I'm trying to be a little more careful about where I put these shadows, because this is the color that is going to be hard to go back over. Not hard, it's just going to take a lot of coats. It's going to be tedious. It's not difficult, it's just annoying. Because, you know, you can paint coats of paint on the same thing over and over and over again your whole life. So we're waiting to find out if we have roof damage. If we do, it's very minor, because our tree guy, before the insurance company will come out, you have to remove all the debris apparently. So our tree guy pulled stuff off the roof and he didn't think there was any damage, or if there is, it's very mild. And then our air conditioner got hit by one of the falling branches, but I think that was reparable as well. And all of that is an insurance problem, but a tree that hasn't fallen isn't. It makes no sense. It's like, okay, wouldn't you rather, like, we could just go live somewhere else and let that tree fall and then you make us half a new house? I don't understand the logic, but that is how it works. Apparently. But again, we got off really light compared to what's happened to a lot of people, and I'm not. Well, okay, I'm complaining a little, because, like, really the bill is complaining worthy, but we are still lucky, and I am aware of this. So hopefully you can start to see, I mean, when we first started, the shirt just kind of looked like a blob, and then starting to put these shadows in is bringing out all the lovely wrinkles and folds and stuff that Julie sculpted for us. That's why I'm taking a second look, because I just want to... Shadows are kind of what makes things look three-dimensional. And then the highlights are like for the pop and the eye-catching and the drama. Quindy LaRue said, I didn't realize that was around your area. I'm glad everything was relatively okay. Yeah, we kind of live at the end of Tornado Alley. We rarely get tornadoes. Every now and then we'll have a warning and we're supposed to go in the basement, and we hardly ever do. Because there's a lot of mountains and stuff where we are, so I think it kind of calms everything down before it hits us. And it was fun. It was the loudest thunder I ever remember. Like, our house just shook and shook, and then the branch or the tree fell, and a big branch fell on the house, and that certainly shook it. But it was like 15, 20 minutes, and then it was all done. It was just a little bit of rain after that. But we get thunderstorms all the time, so. Apart from the thud of something hitting the house, which is, again, also not that unusual. This is not the first tree. This is not the first tree issue. We've had a tree go through the front window of our car while it was parked in the dark. Like, it went in sideways. I don't even know how a storm would do that. We had to remove a tree a few months ago that was hanging over our other neighbor's yard, but luckily that was a much smaller and younger tree. Before we got this is a new roof too, hilariously. So, like, the roof is only 2 years old, because of course. Now I'm going to, no, you know what? I'm going to do a little bit of darker shadows. I spoke too soon. I need darker shadows, because I finished telling you guys how important that is. But before the new roof, the old roof had gotten repaired twice from trees falling on it. One on the front, one on the back. Luckily, the one on the back was the neighbor's tree, so that was not our problem. And actually, one of the most expensive things to fix was that it was like one section of chain link fence got wrecked from that tree falling. And I couldn't believe how expensive that part was. I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, that someone else is paying for that, because I find the cost of one section of chain link fence very offensive. I think I need to get a little bit down in here because his head's hanging over there, so we'll be shadowing the collar a little bit. Definitely need to go deeper shadows where his arm meets his body and where his little tummy hangs over his belt. And there's like a little light spot down here that I just don't seem to be able to get rid of. I wonder if that's a job for Hooky Brush. But I don't know where Hook Brush is right now. Let's see. A little bit right there. I'm going to do lining in between the hand and the cuffs anyway, so I'm not going to bother much with the cuffs. Because I will probably just have to fix that after I paint the skin anyway. Normally I would have painted the skin first. Again, for our new person, that's one of the most common questions when painting a miniature is like, how do I approach it? What do I paint first? What do I leave for last? And one very solid approach to it is kind of think of it as how you get dressed. So you start with your skin, then the clothes are over the skin, and then like his accessories are over the clothes. Then you might have, I like to leave weapons or hair or things that are kind of projecting beyond the body or that are the top, like, you know, it's not impossible that I would go like this. I'm going to try and minimize touching the figure while I'm painting, but sometimes you just have to hold on to it a little. So that's typically why I paint those areas last. And then this is just hanging out here, potentially getting rubbed the whole time I'm painting. So if I leave it until last, I'm less likely to have areas that rub off and I have to repaint. Well, last, near the end. Whereas this guy's weapon is closer in on the figure, so I normally would have left the hair to last time. I think I was just wanting to try out my hair color. I could have painted this weapon a little early in the process. There's a lot of things underneath it, is why I haven't gotten to it yet. So yes, if you guys remember seeing this, I don't know, weeks ago, I finally painted like 3 more parts of this miniature. He's really almost done. I haven't added the red yet. That'll change things a lot. And then it's just leather trim things on the base. But first I got distracted by the Christmas guy, and then there was that Goblins project. So he's kind of languished. And his brother. There's Chop and Grub. I think that one's Chop because of the chopping. I will also like line around these buttons, but because they're probably going to be very dark, I'm not going to bother to do it until the end because I'm just going to paint the whole button area, and that's going to make the lining around it. And the same thing with the belt. But this is kind of part of this same color. So I do want to make sure that I get it dark enough now. I mean, not that I couldn't come back later, but it's going to be easier to do it now. But yeah, don't be afraid to come back later if you have to make adjustments to things. I think that's one of the hardest things for me anyway in miniature painting, was to first of all kind of understand the concept that something might not be done just because I think I finished, I think I finished painting this hat. Once I paint the rest of the figure, maybe the contrast isn't going to be right on the hat anymore, and I will want to go back in and change something. So Rubigon asks, how many minis do you usually have in process at the same time? I prefer really to work on one at a time. For many, many years, I was a one-at-a-time person. If I get distracted from something, particularly if it's for my own benefit and it's not something that I'm doing for Reaper or another client, I may never come back to it. Like this Santa here, I don't even know when I brought this, just the greens that I showed you from the Leprechaun and like what I'm painting today, they're pretty similar, so that's what they would look like in combination. But this guy's really, I mean, he's pretty far in. I've got the trim and all the little gewgaws, and his beard But I like did the main painting of this already years and years ago, and I've never returned to it. I keep telling myself that I'm going to, and then I don't. So that's, for me, I prefer to just have one or two on the go at a time. Like I might, where I would do two is if I was painting something very complex or involved, it's nice to have a miniature like this guy where I can just feel a little more relaxed and I'm just painting, not like I'm having to do this challenging, complicated thing. I often, if I haven't been painting for a while and I get a commission to paint something that is a little more challenging or that I or the customer want to look like really top notch, I will often bust out something like that just to kind of warm up. And then I'll work on the other thing. So I might keep a few figures around that are kind of warm up figures. Or take a break and just paint something over an afternoon. So over the years, I have increased slightly, having a few more things in progress, but I am really bad about if I get distracted away from something and I am not forced to come back to it, I may never actually come back to it. And I think I might want to talk about that for a January show, because we use the term shelf of shame. And is there a point when you go through your shelf of shame and decide something just isn't something you want to work on anymore? Is that okay? Is it okay to say, I abandon this project and I give away or throw out this miniature and it's no longer this like lead weight hanging around my neck, making me feel bad that I didn't do it? And I think that probably is something that we should consider. So I might even go through some of my shelf of shame with you guys and play, keep or toss. Finish or abandon. Because not only do I have a shelf of shame, I have a box of shame. Because when we got our new floors, I was talking about earlier, you have to like box up everything for them to come in and move all your furniture around and put the floors in, of course. I mean, that only makes sense. But I never really did unbox what I used to have. More of a 2 shelves of shame, a bookcase of shame. I don't know. It wasn't the whole bookcase, but I had a lot of in progress stuff, and some of it was like so old that like how I painted had changed, and it was like, do I like repaint it? Do I just finish it real quick and use it for gaming? Like, what do I do with this? And then I also have a lot of things I've done as classroom demonstrations. So I'm working right now on a miniature that I do intend to finish, but I often do like just part of something to show you guys how I might do something or how to work with a particular color. And what do I do with those? Some of them I keep to show people at classes. Others of them may or may not be useful for that purpose. Rings Raccoon keeps everything to cut them up for bits and die raws. Daka Flocka Flame says, I'm gathering up a couple of Warhammer armies to sell right now, as I don't think I'll have time for them. And I think that's, when I first started painting, the figures that I bought that first 6 months or a year, it was like even 2 years after that, I was kind of like, why did I buy these? I don't like them. I don't really want to paint them. I mean, they weren't all horrible. I mean, they were nice miniatures. They just didn't speak to me anymore. And I think I eventually brought them to the Reaper melting. Nomad Zeke says, my shelf of shame is more of a box. Does a room count as a box? Yes. I'm not even talking about the stuff that I bought and I might want to paint. I'm just looking at stuff that I either prepped or partly painted that is now taking up room because, it's kind of half of a thing. So should it become a real thing? Should I just give up on it? Because those things you can't even, all my unpainted stuff, I can just throw that in a box in my basement and not think about it until my husband is like, why are all these boxes in our basement that you weren't thinking about? Because I'm not saying that's definitely happening right now, but it's happening right now. But the stuff that there's actually some paint on, like, then you have to start being a little careful of it, and it's a whole different storage thing. So I think I'm good with shadows. Pendrake TG says Mondays are mean. Oh, did something happen, Pendrake? Hope you're okay. This Monday was pretty mean to me, but it wasn't a particularly Monday-ish mean. So I think I'm going to call that good on the shadow. Well, here, let's put... I feel like this line where his shirt does up isn't really prominent enough. Because that's a nice detail that I like. It'll show more when the buttons are there too, but I want to see that overlap. So people think of lining as very unrealistic, but if you look at someone wearing a button-up shirt, there's one piece of cloth is overlapping another piece of cloth. Even my hands will do it. There's a little shadow line along this finger. That's lining. That's what we're doing. There's shadow lines in between here. That's lining. So it's not some massively unrealistic cartoony thing. If you make the line super thick and pure black, it can look a little cartoony. But the idea, the concept of lining is not an unrealistic thing that we just try to force people to do in miniature painting. So now I'm going to the Holly Berry highlights, which in my original paint scheme for this guy, I didn't use that. I just mixed in between the Brilliant Red and the Red Neon Dust. But when I was overlooking at my shelf picking up the paints last night, I noticed that the Holly Berry seemed pretty close to the colors that I'd mixed, and it would save me time not mixing. And now you get to see a holiday color in action, which I believe is Valender's favorite red. And this can be probably a little more transparent than the shadow colors were, so I may have to go over the same areas with more than one coat, which is often the case with highlights or shadows. You kind of have to reinforce building up the color. And those colors can, in some respects, be easier to work with because you won't get the transition edges as much. If you're trying to do this layering technique with very opaque colors, you're more likely to see where one section was painted over another section. So there is an upside to semi-transparent colors. That's actually, if you want to know the reason why I picked red for people to work with in the layer up kit, that's one of the reasons. It was going to be working with transparent colors for your first one out of the gate, or semi-transparent colors. So it will probably go better, and then also, if I throw that in there, hopefully we have some of the new generation of painters who aren't all horrified by painting red. Because that was one of the first things I ever painted. That was my thought process, at any rate. I want to get back some of the color on the collars. Because that'll be right next to his face. So if the face is green, and we've got some nice bright red colors there, hopefully that will help create our old friend contrast. Because that's going to be color contrast then. So the more kinds of contrast you can put into something, the more particular area will be contrasted. So I wouldn't want to put like value and texture and hue contrast, you know, between the pants and the shirt, because the pants aren't that interesting. But I might want to do all of those things like around the face area. It would work well to use texture contrast, but I probably will not do that because this is a very small miniature. And the type of materials that you usually make Santa suits out of are not super textury. So that's the holly berry. Now, I think to be safe, I'm going to mix kind of in between those two so that I can keep this red neon dust to a very small area. Actually, I don't even have that much hollyberry left. And also, this is clearly a paint that has a fair amount of white in it. So it's going to be more likely to have abrupt transitions or look a little chalky or something like that. I might even mix another one. I may not use both of these, but now I have them. Daka Daka Flame also like hollyberry. Yes, I'm liking it more and more now that I've had the chance to play with it a little. I guess I just, for whatever reason, never really grabbed that one. And now that I have, because we've been doing our swatches, and I want to show you guys colors in action when I can, when they're on sale. Special colors, I mean. I'm really enjoying it. So this, even this transition mix is probably a little more opaque than the color I just used over it. I paint with a fairly light hand now, but the other answer to that would be to add a little water and then make it a little more transparent, or a little less opaque, I guess I should say. You don't want it like transparent. You just want a little less opaque so it doesn't show the transition lines. I used to thin my paint way more than I do now for layering, because that is a way to sort of make up for not having built up brush control, or not wanting to bother with brush control. It would be maybe more what used to be my problem. But I think, especially if you're not actively pushing yourself on brush control, which I would say that I did not, because I tried to avoid stuff like doing freehand as much as possible. But freehand, lining, painting your base coats on very precisely, unlike the way I do it, those are all things that would build up your brush control faster than just the passage of time and general painting practice. Sorry, it is a little hard for me to talk when I start painting. Nomad Ziki is holding mistletoe. He's holding mistletoe and a box of chocolates. I will briefly switch over to the finished picture from last year for those who came a little later. So the main change I've made to this one, I'm using mostly the same colors, other than I've decided to paint the hat in the same darker color as the pants on this one. And if you paint it, I do recommend looking up mistletoe, because it's a slightly different green than you may think it is. It's actually a pretty dull green, almost gray green. And we miniature painters tend to be pretty bad about not looking at stuff. We think we just remember what things look like. And for a variety of reasons I hope to delve into in a blog article soon, we are not as good at that as we think we are. And honestly, there are a lot of people who do, 2D art that don't look at reference as much would be good to do, but we're particularly, it's not a firmly established tradition in our hobby the way it is with people who do portraits or landscapes or whatever. But if you've ever seen the work of Kirill Kanev, and I recommend looking at it. If you haven't seen the work of Kirill Kanev, he's like this super amazing Russian painter. Pendrake thought the box was a book originally, but yeah, I don't know if you can see a little more. And then there's a little chocolate wrapper. That's what that thing on the base is one of the... He clearly... he has a plan to lure someone over to the mistletoe, but then he started eating the chocolates himself. So he didn't completely follow through on the plan, but he had good intentions. But yes, the Warhol Hero Knave, and he's at the point now, like I'm not even sure he's human, but he is a human, and I've seen him in action. I've taken a workshop with him, and he just uses a lot of reference because now he's painting stuff like he'll paint a helmet on. Now he's usually working bigger scale like bus and stuff like that, but he'll paint non-metallic helmets on people where you can see the reflection of the pine trees in the scenery that is around this guy that isn't really around this guy. It's completely imagined. And he looks at reference. He references what textures look like. He references what colors look like. He references what light looks like. That's why his stuff looks so amazing, because he's looking at what things really look like, and he's looking at it with a well-developed artist's eye. Because that's part of the challenge, is it's not just looking at something, because we all look at things, but to really be able to see it, our everyday lives and the way we're trained in school for normal subjects, like non-art subjects, does not train that part of the brain at all. So the idea, we'll just draw what you see, that is not as easy as it sounds like, and that's not because you don't have natural artistic talent or whatever, because natural artistic talent is bull, in my opinion. You may have an advantage in something, like Anne kind of came out of the gate with a bit of an advantage to color. I had a natural attraction to patience of sitting and blending and making things smooth for the rest of my life. But most of what people do artistically is learned. And it's a lot about developing your eye, not the brush stuff. And that is what Kirill has done that makes him like a truly mind-boggling, amazing artist. I don't know if Quindy can find a link. Quindy is fairly certain that Kirill came from a different planet. And he has like a pet parrot. Can you picture Kirill with a pet parrot? It's just really, he's like this very dour Russian guy. Like when you think of the like depressing Russian novels and stuff, he seems like he'd fit into one of those, but then I just have trouble picturing him with a parrot that has eaten some of his miniatures, I think. So there's a mental picture for you. But so I don't know if you can find some of Kirill's stuff, Quindy. He's got a Facebook page. I don't know if he has a Putty and Paint page. His if he does, it might be under Yellow One. I think that's his nom de brush. I don't know if he keeps his Cool Mini page up to date or not, but if he does, it is Yellow One, I think. But just amazing stuff. Like every time he paints something new, I'm like, okay, I figured you had to have like reached the pinnacle of what is humanly possible to do with a miniature and a brush and some paint. And then he posts something new, and I'm like, nope. Most of the girls from my high school thought that was the case, that you were from another planet. I think we all seem like we're from another planet in one way or another. Oh, hi, Sea Bush and Raiders. I'm just painting some Christmas colors of red, just talking to people about how to paint red. And talking about that if they, and my camera froze. If they do want to paint this figure, that it is worth, nope, everything froze. I don't know if you can still hear me. Sometimes when I freeze up, you guys can still hear me. But I am guessing not. So I don't know if you could hear me there. Well, things froze on my end, so I would guess that they froze on your end. So just in case I dropped off before I said it, welcome to Sea Bush and Raiders. It's great to see you. I'm painting some Christmas-style red, which can also be used for non-Christmas things, of course. And we were talking about the value of using reference photos for things, especially something unfamiliar, which would be like the mistletoe that he's holding. So for the people who have just arrived, these are the colors that I'm using to paint this guy. So I'm just working on the highlights now on the lighter color red. So I'm using, I like using a salmon color because it kind of splits the difference between white and orange. So I like this red neon glow color from Reaper. There's some other colors too. But I kind of, that has made my life painting red easier. So this is the painted out swatches of the colors that I'm using. And I did talk about green a bit at the beginning of the video as well. But I'm just now working on like very top highlight layers, which I'm trying to keep to a small area to keep that a lot of the red so that I don't dilute the effect of this being something red. So I'm using my brush with a very fine point, and I'm trying to be very conscious and deliberate about where I'm putting these colors. And then I'm going to go all the way up to that red neon dust. So I hope our raiders have been having a good day. Some of us have been having a very Monday kind of day, but we're trying to overcome the Mondays. So even though this area is kind of like the bottom of his shirt, it flares out a lot. So I do want to put some of my highlights there just to catch those shapes. And then definitely on these parts that are more upward facing. And around the face where I want to. I haven't painted the other part. When I painted this miniature last year for Reaper, I did paint it in the more sensible order of doing the skin first. But since I just wanted to focus on red today, I wanted to jump ahead to the red outfit. Arca Tufis says, mistletoe? Missiles hidden inside toes or missiles made of toes? He does have an exposed toe here in his shoe. I'll switch over to the fully painted one so that you can see that a little better. But if you look at his foot on the left there, he's got just a little goblin toe poking through, so I guess maybe it is mistletoes. Maybe he's just lulling us into a false sense of security with the candy and the mistletoe, and he has an alternative plan in mind. So I'm just going back over some of those areas, reinforcing with that red neon dust. Then I think I'm probably happy to call his outfit done. So where are we time-wise? So I think I will go through kind of the holiday stuff from Reaper. I'm going to move my paint just to be safe. Well, actually, first I'm going to show you this is, something I painted quite a while ago, but it's a fun little... This is one of the rare Christmas things that I've kept, because all the stuff for Reaper eventually goes to Reaper. But this was something I painted for one of the Iron Painter contests. So the theme was seeing red. So whenever we did a theme thing, I like to try to hit it from a few different angles, because the theme part was like a big part of the score. So, I mean, there's actual red, and then she's super mad at this little guy for opening the presents and digging stuff out. And that was the first time I ever painted candy cane wrapping paper, which I've also painted for Reaper. And candy canes are if you want to try freehand wrapping paper, candy canes aren't a bad one to start with, because it's basically a U, and then you just extend one arm of the U out. And then you paint diagonals of the red on top. So I think, let's confirm. I might have painted like a dark color first and then the white to try to give it a bit of edge. But yeah, I think I did do that. So that helps if you want a pattern that looks really separate from the background, it's good to do that. You give it like a dark edge. But then if you want something to blend in like fur, I wouldn't do that. I would do the opposite. I would try to fuzz the edges a little so that they blend in more. Pendrake says, I used to work with an illustrator to do a LEO satellite that was made of toes, a foot, and an ankle. So I am very bad at sculpting. So these are some, although these presents do look like if I wrapped presents, that is what they would look like, because I'm also not great at wrapping presents. But it was interesting trying to figure out how to do the open box. And then the wrapping paper is actually just paper that I painted, tissue paper, I think, that I painted red. But then when you rip it, it does still have that core inside that's white, which is like how wrapping paper looks if you rip it. So I was happy with that part. But this box is a piece of really soft cork that I carved out the inside and made it look flat. That's the best I could come up with for how to make an open box. And then that's like just actual tissue paper put in there. But this was one of the first miniatures I think I painted where I was pretty happy with the reds. And it wasn't that red neon dust because that hadn't come out yet, but it was probably the older, there was a red dust color that has now been discontinued. So it was probably that, or I think I actually mixed orange and white and made my own, and then later realized that I could buy that in a bottle and make my life easier. And I did the same thing with the dark lines here on the stripes. So I think I probably painted it red and then painted on stripes for where the green and the white parts were. So, and this is the kind of thing, like I do want to put him on some sort of base. It's not going to be as elaborate, but maybe throwing in some presents or something would be a good idea, because it's going to be a present for someone who's not a miniature person and isn't going to see it very well on their hobby area. So this is one of this year. Well, this is the only miniature I painted for Reaper this year, but he wasn't in the 12 days. He's part of the Christmas sampler, which let me check and see if I got a text from Ron. I did not. So I think that this is still available. So if you spend more than $60 on the Reaper website, you would get a sampler that has this and Hollyberry, which is one of the colors I was just painting with, and also Ginger Cookie, which I don't have handy, but it is in my swatches. So I'll show the swatches in a sec. But if you don't want to do it that way, he's coming out in January, so you'll be able to just buy him plain. A lot of people have said they really like this guy and might even want to do like a small unit with him, because you could probably do some conversions. The arm attaches separately, so you could probably do some conversions and have some fun with that. So that was fun. And I'd done some previous streams where I was testing these different brushes for dry brushing, and based on the results of that, I ended up using some of those brushes to paint the thing. Unfortunately, I don't think that Reaper has put any of those up on the YouTube channel yet, because Justin's been really slammed, so he hasn't been able to do that. And here is my, speaking of the holiday paints, zoom out. So if you'd like to see these swatched live, I did that last week. And there are some videos of me doing swatches on YouTube, Reaper Miniatures channel, where I talk about why you would do swatches and why I do this thing where I thin it down so you can see the color as it comes out of the bottle and the watered down color and the value of that. So these colors are available in one big set from Reaper this year. Some of them are brand new this year. Some of them have been out previous years. Or you can buy them in sets of 3. There's 4 different sets of 3. Do I know what is in what set? No, I do not. But if you go on the Reaper website, you can find that information out very easily. These 2 are metallics. So I'm going to wave the paper around a little so you can see how the sheen is. This is a new color, Dreidel Blue. It's a very nice, intense blue. This chocolate bar is a new color, and I'm always happy to have more brown. I like the brown a lot, actually. Nomad Zeke says we need a giant gingerbread man to be Mongo from Shrek. I thought the gingerbread man was Gingy, which I almost painted him like Gingy, because I love Shrek. But I wanted to use some of these colors, so I went with different color, because I think his buttons are purple. And then these 2 colors are the ones that are in the Christmas sampler with the gingerbread man and candy. There's also candy. That's a new color. That's a new color. This is really nice red. Maybe I should even grab that for my shadows today. But alas, I did not. And this green is one of the new greens. Now I'll go to the slideshow for the rest of them. And I realized that I had actually left, I think I'd left this guy out of my slideshow from last week. So this is the range of colors that I painted the original one with that you just saw the photos of. And I added a few colors to it this time just so I didn't have to do mixing on stream and it would be faster. But you could mix the steps in between, no problem, if you only had like the lightest, the middle, and the darkest color. And then we also talked about green earlier in the stream. So if you want to watch the video on demand, I did some green matching to something that I need to paint repair I need to make for a friend. And then these are greens that I used on St. Patrick's Day miniature, but that would work very well for Christmas figures as well. This is the leprechaun Finn Greenwell. Here's the gingerbread man in photographs, since I know the quality on my video isn't always as amazing as I would like it to be. So these figure, not that guy, but all of these ones that I'm showing next, plus the mistletoe goblin that I was painting the red on, these are all available for individual purchase now. So this is, I painted this to look like one of my cats. Even though he doesn't care about the Christmas tree, he would, if he did, he would give me that face if I was yelling at him about climbing the Christmas tree. He'd be like, what? What do you mean? You put it here. Why shouldn't I climb on it? And we are thankful every day that he doesn't have wings. Although he's now so chubby that I don't think he'd be able to lift himself up with wings, but he can jump a little more than we thought he could. So this is a super cute dragon with a stocking that I painted before. I kind of don't think that that's his stocking. So this is another example of painting green, and I do have an article up about painting this figure. The article is mostly talking about the light. So I did some pre-shading kind of with my primer and then also blocking in with the green. So it's talking about how to get that light across. Like if you look at the wings, you see the wing on the right side has more light hitting it than the wing on the left side. So you don't always have to paint the light as if it's coming straight down from above. I like to paint as if it's coming from one side a lot. This is a little baby Yeti who's found some Christmas cookies. The decorations were added with Woodland Scenics, what do they call it? Water effects. So they're not sculpted in, so you can customize them to be however you want. And not last week, but the week before, I think, I did a show where I showed using that product. I was making candles, but with like the candle drips and stuff like that, which I use the exact same technique to make the buttons and the little lines of white icing on the gingerbread man. And that should still be on Twitch, I think. So that's what they look like before I put the decorations on. So you can also paint them undecorated, or you can just use pure paint to paint the decorations. But I thought it was nice to add some texture. This is the Christmas elf, which I did pre-shading on that one too. And then just the joy of painting white. I think we all know that. Architufus says flight assisted jump, just like the early bird jumps higher, a cat with wings can jump higher, which is frightful. Yeah, before he was quite as big as he is now, he could jump freakishly high. He's still pretty good at it, but he could get like more than halfway up the wall back then. I had something that a friend had made for me with beads that was hanging up what I thought was out of cat distance, and then he proved me wrong. This is another cat dragon who also enjoys messing with Christmas tree things. I think Julie did such a great job with these. They're super fun. And you can see how long the tail on this one is. Very cute. This is Tinker the Christmas gnome. And I had a lot of fun painting him. So that's a bit orangier of a red than the one I just showed you. This one I had left off of the slideshow, which is sad because it's one of my favorite. I think what happened is I forgot to put the miniatures in from last year because I forgot both the mistletoe goblin and this one, which were the new miniatures from last year. So if you want to paint this, you can see that there's a lot of presents on the base, and you may have trouble telling which present, like what object they're supposed to be once you prime it or in the metal. And if you do, you can go to my I have a blog page about painting this, and I've got zoomed in pictures where I've circled things and explained what each thing is. Like over on the right, there's some paint bottles, and there's some paint brushes under the little cat toy that's next to the sock monkey. So Julie just put so many amazing details in here, and some of these, like that little in between the books is a little dragon figurine, and I interpreted it as miniature, so I painted it kind of like silver pewter color. But then Bob and Julie actually explained it was a toy from when they were kids that they both liked, even though they didn't know each other then. So there's lots of great little details there. This dragon hasn't opened all their presents yet, but clearly is just in love with the concept of even having presents, which I agree with. I get a hoardy dragon. I agree with that. These miniatures all came out in the same year, so I have this picture kind of to show the scale of them. They're all pretty dense pieces of metal. It's just some things are different sizes than others. So that's the whole slideshow. Where are we? Well, maybe I'll just go back to working a little bit. I'll do some of my lining on the mistletoe guy. Get my gray paper back though, because I know my cutting mat kind of interferes with the focus sometimes. And Med Zeke says that cat dragon is the last thing an ornament sees before it dies. Rings Raccoon says nothing is out of cat distance. I can testify. Yeah. I can imagine that's true. My cat that did like the tree, I'm kind of sad she doesn't care anymore. She's like 12 and she's just like, that's nice. I don't really feel like climbing up the tree anymore, even though she's still quite agile. And, you know, she's like a cat that's still doing her yoga or whatever. We need an abdominal snow monster for Aberan to fight. It needs to have a 12-pack. Okay, that is hilarious. I think we need to send that to the sculptors without Michael knowing, and then send one off to Frank and have it be a surprise. Some kind of crazy ab monster. So lining is fiddly, I'm not gonna lie. It's a pain in the butt. I think that's secretly why people who resist doing lining don't want to do it, is because it's a giant pain in the butt. But as I mentioned, the side benefit is that you build your brush control more quickly. So it went a little wide on me, which if I'm quick, I might be able to get it off. But if I'm not, I just paint over it. It's acrylic paint, paints over itself. Mistakes are not the end of the world. And again, for the benefit of our new painter, you may see that I'm changing the position of the miniature fairly often. And that is because you will also find it easier to operate your brush if you are really only doing the same one or two brush strokes all the time. So instead of moving my painting hand around, I would rather move the miniature around so that my painting hand is just making the same motion over and over again and getting better at that motion all the time. So here's one reason that I like lining, is there was a little part under there that I had not got the red paint onto. Just a little part here too. So it's going to cover that up, because I almost guarantee that if I took a picture, the gray primer would show up, even though you could not see it with your naked eye. Because that is how taking pictures of miniatures works. It is the guaranteed way to find the mold lines you missed, or the places where you didn't get paint in the crevices, or where your blinds aren't as smooth as you thought they were. It is also probably the thing I am most bitter about with miniature painting hobby, is that I have to learn some whole other hobby. I have to learn how to take pictures to do my hobby. I just want to paint miniatures. I don't want to take pictures. I'm not a photographer. So I'm not going to put that dark in between the upper and lower layers of where the shirt fastens, because I think that's probably going to be a little too dark. But I will likely be painting these buttons either metallic or black. So I do want to have a nice lining around them. I think I painted them black in the original. Metallic might draw too much attention. So I guess I don't know exactly what I'm going to do next week. Maybe I'll finish Santa. Maybe I'll do how to paint not Christmas red and green. Rink says, right, I hated photography in art school. I avoided it like the plague, and then I had to learn it anyway. Well, that is unfortunate. I kind of do miniatures photography like a magic spell. It's like, okay, here's step 1, here's step 2. I don't know what I'm doing, but this works. It's not like I can translate it to taking pictures of anything else. I would actually say my biggest piece of advice would be to work on your lights. So try moving your lights around, try adding lights, try making them further away or closer to. If you have a fairly recent cell phone camera, you should be able to get decent pictures of your miniatures. You just might have to play with where your lights are. And a flat background. So the same reason I put this out here when I'm painting, so the camera will focus on the miniature. You'll see people try to take pictures of their miniatures, and they've got like their paints in the background and all this other stuff that's on their desk, and the camera has trouble deciding what to focus on. It will often pick the wrong thing. Plus, it distracts the viewer. It just looks messy and distracts the viewer. So if you're entering a contest, like clear off your desk and just get a flat piece of gray or brown paper, like even just a piece of cardboard off the side of a box, will make a better background for your miniature than a messy desk. Because that's a fairly neutral mid-tone. This isn't exactly, like this is a different kind of paper, but it's a very similar idea. It's a mid-tone brown paper. Maybe I should come back and paint the mistletoe next week. I don't know. I thought I had ideas for the rest of the month, but now that I'm here, I'm like, what was my plan? I don't remember my plan. And photography should be called lighting, setup, and mastery. This is true. And just taking a million pictures. I mean, I think that's one of the big tricks that professional photographers do. I mean, it's easy now because we have cell phones, but for those of us old enough to remember when you had to pay for film and then you had to take that film into some place and then they had to develop it and then you had to pay for that. Like, I have like 12 pictures of my first cat, and I loved her and she was amazing, but it's like you took pictures for super important events. You didn't just take 400 pictures of your pet, which is what I do now that I have a cell phone. So many pictures of my pets. I think that's all the parts that need lining. But yeah, every time I get a new camera, even if I'm getting, a more expensive one, I don't go for a full DSLR because really I just take pictures with this. But these new mirrorless cameras, well, they're not that new anymore, but this new style of digital camera is called mirrorless. But every time I upgrade a camera, which is maybe every 5 to 7 years, sometimes because I break one, sometimes because they've just improved camera technology so much since I last bought one, I'm about due for a new camera, I think. But there's always a learning period of changing the lights or changing the way the camera receives the lights or the ISO or whatever those things are. Right, Rings Raccoon, I take like 100 plus pictures of my finished miniatures, of which I get maybe 5 usable ones. Yeah, even though they're not moving, little angle changes can make a big difference. Like just, this face, if you look at it from a little more side on, you're not really getting a lot of expression. If I switch it to just a bit more from above, it might work for this character, but then this guy, more from above, I'm going to be obscuring a lot of his face, and I probably want to go more straight on for the angles. So it is good to experiment, not just with the moving the figure this way, where you're getting like the different angles of the front and the back and the sides and stuff. And it's often side views are just going to look terrible. I usually take them for my own reference, but they often do not look good on miniatures. So you'll get like a partial side, like that would be a good side view for him, but just dead on side view is often not going to work. But also vary your angle this way a little. So try, maybe dead on. And I've had miniatures where I actually kind of had to go like that to really get a picture of the face, because the face was downturned. And you couldn't see the details. Quindy says she feels bad if I don't take at least 8 pictures of my cat every single day. Yes, this is true. And then now I feel bad because I take more pictures of one cat than I do of the other cat. Because I wouldn't have thought it was true, but there seems to be like a photogenic thing with cats too. And my one cat, she's very adorable and pretty, but it's just super hard to capture with the camera. Corporia is here. Hi, Corporia. Rings Raccoon says, send me your old cameras when you get a new one. Cameras are expensive and I am poor. Generally, my cameras have broken or worn out, or I am giving them to someone when I do get a new one. But yeah, I would say don't buy like a point and shoot. If you're buying a camera to paint miniatures, don't. Just use your cell phone, or you have to spend at least $400. This has been my experience. I know that's not everyone's favorite answer, but that's been my experience, that, like a point and shoot just isn't going to be enough of an improvement over what you can get with a cell phone to be worth the money. So I think we're close to time. Yep. I need to find some less round thing, I guess. But I know some people who use dice cubes, but that just seems like it would hurt your hand a little bit. So I stick with my spools. But, all right, we'll go. Frank Raccoon says, I feel bad if I don't take dozens of pictures of my pony when I'm out at the farm. Well, how could you not take dozens of pictures of a pony? Oh my gosh. But thank you all for joining me today. I'm sure there's a graphic somewhere. I never know how to find the graphic of what the weekly schedule is. But Monday to Friday, you get Ann at 11:30 Texas time. So that's Central. I'm on Monday. Crow's Nest is Tuesday at 5 p.m. Wednesday is Miniatures Den at 1 p.m. Thursday, you get 2 shows. You get the Crafty Creative at 2 p.m. So all the stuff about how to do practical things and basing and terrain and all that kind of stuff that I don't know. That's where you go to learn that. And then Reaper Live at 6 p.m. with the giveaways. You all know about that one, I bet. And then Friday is Reaper Land at 3, and every other week is Reaper Errant. This is not a Reaper Errant week. And in fact, we're not back until January. But if you want to go watch last week's video on demand, it was a Christmas-themed episode, well, holiday-themed. Frank actually drew from a number of different holiday traditions to give us some fun holiday adventuring. Quindy does not even know what's up with the graphics, so it's not just me. And Corporia says hugs and merry happy holidays. And I say the same thing. I hope you all have happy holidays, or I hope you find good ways to distract yourself if you are someone who does not love the holidays. And I don't blame you for that if you are. And I'll come up with something for next week. If you have something particular you want to see, feel free to DM me on Discord or the Reaper forums, and hopefully I will see it. But I'll see you with something next week. We'll do something fun. Maybe topical, maybe not. And now we're rating someone. So thanks again for coming, and I'll see you next week.